for having me today. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a local case study that I had the good fortune of working on before I started teaching. It's a light rail extension. We call the light rail the trolley in San Diego. How many have ridden the trolley before? Oh my goodness, just about everyone. Okay, that's great. So you're familiar with the trolley as a transportation modality and undoubtedly the extensive bus network we have here. And so what I'm going to start out by introducing is how, as a geographer, we relate transportation to the study of the phenomena that covers the Earth in a geographic setting. Okay? And so I'm linking geography to transportation planning. For many of you are wondering, what is the connection? Okay, there is a connection and it will be established. So here we go, urban transportation planning from a geographic perspective. And the case study of interest is the Mission Valley East Light Rail Extension, or LRT. I use some acronyms in this presentation, but I try to address what they are. So you see LRT is essentially the trolley. And so I've just described the project a little bit. It's a $500 million trolley line from Qualcomm Stadium in East Mission Valley to Grossmont Center, which is a mixed-use development in East County, a lovely community, Mesa. Okay. And that's where this particular extension terminates. It's about a 6-mile extension in the urban area of San Diego, the metropolitan area of San Diego. So the city of San Diego, really, is what this project encompasses. Okay, the major subdisciplines of both physical and human geography are shown here. And what this tries to achieve is that it lets the individual know, that's present today, lets the individual know that there is a continuum between these two major branches of geography. Okay? The branch on the left is very clearly physical geography, and many of you are in my physical geography classes, and we talk about things like water resources, meteorology, the study of the atmosphere and how it interacts with the hydrosphere and the lithosphere and so on, and biogeography, so that encompasses the biosphere, living things, plants and animals, and their distribution mainly. Okay, geomorphology, we're talking about the study of landforms, how they develop, how they morph over geologic time, and sometimes over a human time scale. And that's something we're certainly concerned about as a transportation planner. What happens if we have a seismic event, okay, and the soil liquefies, and the tracks and the trolleys and all the people in them slide down the Mission Valley wall onto the freeway? That would be a problem. So we have to look at geomorphic elements when we're planning transportation nodes, and meteorology and climate and soils. Soil types are very important to look at as well when you're doing a building project. Okay, from the human geographic perspective over here, we talk about and look at social geographic elements like anthropology, okay, and architecture, and how elements of those fit into a geographic perspective when planning different facilities. Okay, cultural geography, main components being language and religion, economic, behavioral. What are people's choices? It's all about choices that people have, the choices that people make, and what causes those decisions to be made. What causes a person to decide to take transit versus ride in their automobile. Okay? Political geography and also urban geography are absolutely essential principles of human geography. And as in the case of this little lecture here, urban transportation planning, you can imagine that it probably falls mainly under the human realm and specifically under mainly urban geography as a subdiscipline of human geography. Okay, but there is a holistic synthesis in that we have to look at principles from both realms of geography and evaluate them geospatially to determine how best to plan facilities for humans, okay, in accordance with sustainable principles and with the environment. So we're focusing on the human geographic aspect here with regard to urban planning and human geography. And some of the phenomena that we study in human geography, if you do have my human or cultural, as it's often called, geography class this semester. And so these are some of the components that we look at when we're studying the human and the geospatial aspects of humans, their movements around the planet. This is historically fascinating, why people live where they live. Agricultural systems. This is the single most important aspect of human geography with regard to how humans manipulate the environment. We're living in a time where global warming is on the tip of everybody's tongue. We have unprecedented rates of species loss, and modern commercial agriculture is manipulating habitats and environments around the world, especially the developed world. And so we have to look at that and take that into account when we're studying different phenomena in different world regions. Urban systems are essential. Most of the world's people live in cities, especially in the developed world mainly, okay? And those that live in the developing regions around the earth, they're moving to cities, they're migrating to cities, so we have to understand how the urban area as a social development mechanism works. It's essential. Population, we call the study of population demography, which is the characteristics of the human population. And so we need to understand those characteristics, how old people are, okay? And what are fertility rates, how many children are people having, okay? What are average incomes of a certain population, and so on and so forth. So they're essential to making interconnections between regions. Settlements, again, where people live. Economic activities are also essential. What makes the world go round, the world economy. We need to understand what different kinds of jobs people are working. If they're working in the primary sector, like extracting strawberries, or they're working in the tertiary sector, okay? Where they're doing research and development. And that helps to tell us a lot about where a person's living and what their level of economic development is, what their lifestyle might be like, their standard of living, and what kind of transportation they might have access to. Transportation, okay? So this is really the focus of this topic, this particular subtopic in the realm of human geography, which connects places together through points and lines on a map. Recreational activities are, of course, important. Don't get enough of those these days. We like to look at where they're distributed. What kind of land uses do we have in San Diego that can foster recreational activities? Do we have enough open space? That's essential. That's essential. Religion, distribution. Where people practice religion. Or do we have sacred sites in San Diego, for example? Political systems are essential, okay? And how different political systems develop, whether it's a democracy or a socialist regime. And then finally, social traditions, which is linked to culture. And it's absolutely essential to study as a subcomponent of human geography. We care about social traditions. Okay? And some social traditions lend themselves to transportation. In San Diego, we seem to have a love affair with the automobile. We have trouble socially taking public transit, some of us. Our social behaviors and activities help to dictate other linked activities. What is transportation planning, you might wonder? Transportation planning is the field involved with the siting, or the site, trying to find a site or a location. So the siting of transportation facilities, generally streets and highways, okay, and also public transport lines. Today we're looking at public transport, specific modality. Not buses, not taxis, we're looking at LRT. Streets and highways are not the subject of focus today. Who's responsible for California's infrastructure? Most of you probably are familiar with who's responsible on kind of a basic level. But I've included it here for your convenience. We got highways, which are mainly a jurisdiction of the California Department of Transportation. We call that Caltrans. Okay? Roads, which are also Caltrans, jointly operated and maintained and planned by the County of San Diego, the City of San Diego, okay, two of our primary regional planning agencies. Public transit, we're shifting over to public transportation now, buses and trains and so on. Our regional governing body, SANDAG, which is an acronym you've probably heard, San Diego Association of Governments. They do things other than public transit. They dole out funds for different development projects. Okay, they worry about sustainable planning in the city, and they help to organize different cities around within the county of San Diego and help them work together. Okay, who else does public transit? Metropolitan Transit System. If anybody here has taken the trolley, and you all have indicated pretty much that they have, the Metropolitan Transit System is the operator. Okay, that's an umbrella organization that includes San Diego Trolley and San Diego Transit. North County Transit District, NCTD, is kind of its own entity, but it does work with Sandag and the Metropolitan Transit System. Okay? So there's constant coordination going on with outlying cities that are in the county of San Diego, but not in the city of San Diego, like the city of Santee, for example, okay? Which is pretty far east. And unincorporated areas. Unincorporated areas like Lakeside. Okay? There's people that live in Lakeside, and even though they aren't a city, officially they're within the county boundaries and they need service too. Because it's all about the individual. It's all about the pedestrian here. Okay? And so we have to coordinate with other cities and unincorporated areas. And in my role as a public transit planner with Sandag, it used to be called MTDB, or the Metropolitan Transit Development Board. Now it's enrolled together with Sandag into a super bureaucratic agency. Okay, and my title was actually the East County representative, my favorite part of San Diego. Okay, I got to coordinate public transit and facilities, mainly bus lines and a few rail lines in the outlying cities in East County, La Mesa, El Cajon, Santee, and incorporated areas like Lakeside. So if anybody had a complaint, they would call me. If anybody wanted additional service, they would call me. If somebody wanted to know about the mixed use that was happening in Santee, Trolley Square, they would call me. And those kind of things. And I also helped work on this Mission Valley's light rail extension, trolley extension that went into East County, along with hundreds of other people, to be honest with you. Hundreds of other people were working on this project. And then private consultants. There has to be a place for private consultants who are some of the brightest voices of reason in the planning industry. Okay? They can often take a step back and look at what you're doing in an unbiased fashion and say, hey, this doesn't make any sense. We can't afford to put another $500 million extension of the I-5 freeway that nobody's going to ride. Okay? Why do cities invest in transit? I borrowed this from Alan Hoffman, another transportation planner in the region and around the world. And so these are some of the, this is from his website, the Mission Group. I had permission from him to take this. Why do cities invest in transit? You might be wondering. Well, in theory, they want to reduce congestion. As a transportation planner at Sandag, or MTDB as it was called when I was there 5 years ago, or 6 I guess now, they were careful to tell us not to tell people that the new trolley extension was going to reduce congestion, because we can't say for sure that's going to happen. Like, people are going to get out of their car just because they see a brand new aerodynamic trolley with low floors and say, hey, I just want to abandon my car, I want to take the trolley, and therefore the IA corridor would be relieved of all the congestion. That wasn't the case, it isn't the case, but it does help lure people into taking another mode, especially if it's got its dedicated lane, like you see here. So they don't have to wait. There's got to be some incentives. Improve air quality. Reduce sprawl. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Urban sprawl, new urbanism, and increased choices. What types of public transit exist in San Diego? I was trying to think of kind of the most fundamental questions that you might have and address them ahead of time. San Diego modalities include bus, okay, LRT or trolley, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. That is really what we're focusing on here. Paratransit, like taxis, and smaller, 10-person buses that come around and pick up disabled individuals. For example, ADA paratransit buses, Americans with Disabilities, and so on. Commuter rail, the coaster is the commuter rail in San Diego, okay, because it primarily carries commuters going to work. Okay, so they have it all cushy with the tables that fold out and the ports that plug in for the laptops. You got the view going along the I-5 freeway. It's spectacular. Okay. It's clean as a whistle. It's beautiful. Commuters coming into the downtown central business district, which is an exploding residential and employment center. Passenger rail, Amtrak, okay? San Diego, they go long distances, passengers. San Diego modalities do not include, you may have noticed, we don't have any rapid transit in San Diego. Ask me why later, if you want. You probably figured it out. Heavy rail is another name for rapid transit. Okay? You might have heard the term subway. Usually we think of the subway, and that's correct. High-speed bus. We don't have that yet. Okay? All of our buses that I know of, without being a transportation planner currently, I'm currently a geography teacher. And I love being a geography teacher. But I still have to do the research just like you guys do, okay? Where are we at with high-speed bus? I haven't seen any high-speed buses that have dedicated lanes so they can move faster than cars, okay? But this is planned for the I-15 corridor because of the severe congestion. You might have seen the congestion pricing in the I-15 corridor. It's one of the only places in the country that exists. It's a pilot program where people pay to drive alone based on the level of congestion. If it's really congested and you want to whip down to your job downtown from Rancho Bernardo, you might have to pay $8. So they got some high-speed bus developments. It's on the SANDAG website, so check it out. High-speed rail, we don't have that yet. They've been studying it and talking about it, the transportation planners in San Diego, for years. There wasn't much buzz when I was the transportation planner about the high-speed rail. It may be called magnetic levitation. In some cases, it actually levitates above the track. It does exist in Asia, okay? And we had it here. It would take about 2 hours to get to San Francisco. Unfortunately, it's not being planned for the coastal corridor. It's more of an interior corridor. In fact, I was reading this particular report several days ago, and now, instead of doing a high-speed rail from San Diego up to Northern California on the interior, on the lee side of the Sierra Nevadas, now we're looking at just building a new airport, okay, which we've been looking at for several decades, but having a maglev take it out to a new airport in Imperial County. That's still in the exploration phase. As far as I can tell, that'll never occur, okay, because of the cost and the potential ridership, which is probably not very high. Okay, and then monorail. We don't have that, all right? And there's a picture of the monorail down here, what that technology looks like. Some of you have maybe ridden a monorail at Disneyland or something, or up at the Getty Museum near UCLA. Okay, what is light rail transit? Moving along here, light rail or light rail transit is a form of a tram system that generally uses electric rail cars on private rights of way, meaning they're not in the traffic with the cars. They're not waiting at the same stoplights the cars are waiting at, and so on. Sometimes it's in streets or it crosses over a street. Light rail is a step below rapid transit, which is fully grade separated. Okay, fully grade separated. The tracks are usually down below. You can't, go down onto the tracks in a subway station. Okay, you have to wait for the subway to pull up and then you get on. LRT is electric, which means that the power is provided overhead through wires. We call them catenary. LRT travels up to about 55 miles per hour, but those of you who have taken the trolley, which again, many of you have indicated that you have, you usually get up to 55 miles an hour because the stops are so close together. Okay, so it doesn't go real fast. It doesn't climb up steep grades, which is a problem in San Diego because of the hilly topography. It was a real problem trying to serve San Diego State, going up a grade from West Mission Valley all the way up to the top of that mesa. They never made it to the top of the mesa. No. They dug a tunnel underneath San Diego State, about 50 feet from the surface. LRT carries fewer people than rapid transit. Okay, so the subways are real effective in very dense corridors like Manhattan. They can carry lots of people. We have more urban sprawl here. People are spread apart. We don't have anything like they've got in Manhattan in terms of upward development and densification of human living dwellings. It's generally above ground. The trolleys are visible. You can see them when you're driving around. They pass by from time to time, overhead or down below. Sometimes they're elevated. There is a station that is elevated on the new extension, the Mission Valley East extension. They're rarely subterranean. In fact, you won't believe this. The only subway station on a light rail line in the country is in San Diego. It's a signature station, and it's at San Diego State. And the focus is the Mission Valley East Light Rail Extension at San Diego State. That is one of the new stations, and here it is. This is really the best picture that I have here. So we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty. It's such a large project. We don't really get into every facet of it, as you might have imagined. Otherwise, we'll be here until next week, and you don't want that. So we're just going to look at this station and notice the overhead catenary. Okay, we notice that it's at grade, so you can walk right onto it. The new trolleys, which are about $2 million a piece, each one of these trolley cars has low floors, which means you can roll a wheelchair right on. You don't have to walk up the little stairs, and it's real narrow. Okay, and so that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing. Well, the lighting here is it's a little bit bright, but there's a real aggressive public art scheme going on here, and that was one of the things that I worked on during the planning phase of this project. Again, this is a project that took 15 years from its inception till it was open for business. Okay? The planning phase was the phase that I worked on for 7 or 8 years, actually, as it turns out. And I only worked on it during the environmental phase of that planning phase for about 3 years. I did my other transportation planning at private consultants. Working on other projects like parking and so on and so forth. Okay, so you can see the public art in here. I was on the panel that selected the public artists for each of these new stations on this line. There are 4 new stations on this 6-mile extension, and there were different artists for each one. It's an incredible station. This is the mezzanine level here, and it opens up into the Aztec Bowl. It's at, well, we're about 50 feet from the surface down to the trolley. And so it's still considered subterranean or underground. So this is an awfully long tunnel that takes you over to the other side of campus, the east side of campus, you're exiting. Okay, what else? If you have a chance, you want to get off here. If you're taking the new green line, and take a look at all the public art. There's public art inside the station and outside the station. Why do we use such aggressive public art? That was a huge thing on this trolley extension, the public art aspect of it. None of the other trolley extensions, there are 50 miles of track in San Diego, have public art. This is a new thing. It's attractive. Okay? We're trying to make places safer, trying to lure riders. Okay? So those are the main reasons. And we're really trying to recapture the lost art of placemaking. That's what geography is all about, the sense of place. What feeling do you have? What feelings are elicited when you arrive in a place? Everybody has a cognitive image that develops in their mind. When I say the word Disneyland, okay? Everybody has a cognitive image in their mind when you hear the word bus stop. Okay? Let me acquaint you with our existing light rail transit system. Here it is. We have 50 miles of track. The blue line goes from Mexico or to San Isidro, the border, up to downtown, and then through the Bayside up to Old Town. It terminates there. The orange line is downtown. Here's Petco Park. Okay. And it goes all the way out to Santee. And the green line, okay, is here mainly in Mission Valley. They have the operating plan taking it out to Santee today. Now, for a long time, a decade at least, there was a gap here. Okay? This was not here, and I'll show you that on the next graphic. These are the new stations on this line that I worked on. Mainly, again, as it went through the environmental planning phase and the public art phase and some other specific things that I worked on. Like where to put bicycle facilities for people who ride to work and also take public transit. So Grantville, SDSU, Alvarado Center, and 70th Street were not there until recently. It just opened. This is the extension here. Okay, I couldn't find a map that had it, with the gap here. But you can see, for many, many years, people that live in Santee that wanted to go to the Qualcomm Stadium for an event, about 1 in 3. Like 1 in 3 people who attend a football game go there by public transit, the trolley specifically. And they would have to come all the way down here and transfer, go all the way around here. It took about 2 hours. So now, people out of East County can come into Grossmont, make a transfer, and they're there. Okay? About half hour or so. And so it really filled a need in the connectivity of the existing transit system. It needed to be connected. There was a gap there. And this was thought that this connection would increase ridership. It would add about another, $1.25 million possible, not riders, but trips a year. Okay, so that's significant. Okay, so here is this Mission Valley East extension. It's a 5.8-mile extension. It's completed in July of 2005. It connects Mission Valley with inland residential communities. Here are the inland residential communities, like Santee and El Cajon. The Mission Valley East Light Rail Transit Extension opened in July 2005, and it closed the gap in the existing trolley system, providing service to SDSU, which has 35,000 students, faculty, and staff. So that was a need there to serve that school. Okay, and 3 additional stations. Here they are. Grantville is a new station. It's an elevated station. It's 50 feet above the surface. You can't miss it if you ever take the I-8 freeway. Okay? The new extension crosses the freeway. It hugs the Caltrans right-of-way on the south side of the I-8 corridor. You have SDSU Transit Center, okay, which you can clearly see here. This is a tunnel, the only one in the country that's light rail, okay, light rail technology that goes underground. Okay. Here's another one that is not in a tunnel. Okay. The Alvarado Medical Center right in front of the hospital there, and then the 70th Street Station. That's the last one on this new line that opened in July 2005. The 70th Street is that grade. Okay. That particular station. Okay. How to plan an LRT route. Again, this is a behemoth job, and there are thousands of people working on it from beginning to end. Mostly consultants. Mostly consultants doing the technical work. Okay, as a planner at an agency like Sandag, you're mostly managing consultants who are really the experts doing all the work, and so I did a lot of that. And at any one time, let's say I managed about 10 different consulting firms on different facets of this project. One of them had to do with public art, another one had to do with environmental issues, another one had to do with marketing. How do we market this? How do we get people to ride this $500 million extension so that we can make a profit? There is no transportation system in the country that makes a profit. Okay? If the transportation system, it's a public service, if it can recoup 50% of the costs by the tickets that people pay for, then that's considered good. Okay? And believe it or not, San Diego's transit system last time I looked was recovering about 50% of the cost. Okay? So the question of funding comes to mind, and I'll address that in a minute. How in the world do we pay for this? Are we paying for it? Are the San Diego residents paying for a $500 million trolley extension in their backyard? Not entirely. Okay, so we have hundreds of different factors that have to be taken into consideration. This is a project that's very wide in scope, and I just tried to address a few of some of the main concerns in the planning phase. I don't address engineering or construction whatsoever at this particular time. Okay? You have to get an engineer to do that. Planning an LRT route requires extensive collection of geospatial data, again relating it to geography. How does this relate? We have to collect so much data that make your head spin. So much data has to be collected. Spatial analysis has to be conducted of that data to make sense of it. We have to quantitatively manipulate using regression analysis, chi-square statistic, multiple regression analysis, figure out what is significant, what hypotheses that we have are significant, what works and what doesn't. And finally, representation of data using GIS, which is the hottest field in geography right now. Okay, fully half of the geography majors getting a 4-year degree in this field of geography are employed in GIS specifically, which is cartography. It's automated cartography, making maps, fabulous maps, crunching numbers, and getting instantaneous results. More maps have been created using GIS, like ArcView and ArcGIS, and these are some of the programs. Google Earth, which is kind of a real user-friendly program, kind of lightweight, I would say. More maps have been created in the last 5 years using GIS than all of the maps that have been created since the beginning of time. Since people, or something resembling Homo sapiens, have been making maps, drawing with sticks in the sand or petroglyphs. So it's an incredible tool. And we do have GIS on campus here at San Diego State University through the Center for Earth Systems and Research, or CSER Lab, has a GIS program, and we have an incredible GIS program at Mesa College. If you don't know what to do, if you're interested in geography, as many of you have indicated that you have, I have many geography professionals right now in class, which is exciting. Consider GIS. Consider taking some classes, because we are in the middle of a technological revolution. And GIS is where it's at. It's a hotbed for geography. Its inception was geography. It's used in every industry around the world. Identify existing transportation corridors. So this is one thing that an individual has to do when they're thinking about planning a new transit extension, a trolley extension. If we can piggyback on existing transportation corridors like the I-8 freeway and build it right along the I-8 freeway, then we can minimize environmental impacts. Okay? And we can also perhaps use some of the existing transit connections, okay, like bus stops and freeway exits and park and ride lots and so on. Okay. Here I've identified the existing gap. Okay. It's not existing anymore because this line was built. When I was working on it, it was not built. And so we identify existing gaps in routes. So that's a logical place to build a route extension. We look at things like assessment of travel purpose. Okay? Average daily trips by hour and trip purpose. We need to know these kind of things. Why are people traveling? Mainly to go to work here, as evidenced by this bar chart. So can we locate transportation nodes near places of employment? Yes. The answer is yes. Where do people work? This is some Sandbag data that shows employment densities. These are forecasted employment densities for 2030, but they're still helpful. We have current employment densities. And so we can see that most of the people are working in this lower southwest quadrant. And so let's focus our transportation nodes there. Okay? And here's the Mission Valley East Corridor that was built. Origin and destination is important. Okay? What are the most common linkages between trip ends? This is the kind of stuff that we hear about. This is the kind of data that has to be collected. Okay? Where are people coming from? Where are they going to? It's all about geography. Origin and destination. They're going from home and they're going to work. They're going back home. Okay? They're going from home and they're going to school. So it's logical then to find out where people live. If they're going from home to work, where are people living? Well, again, 3/4 of the population of San Diego County live in the southwest quadrant, in the urbanized area of metropolitan San Diego. This is where we focus our transportation. Okay? Our densest areas, downtown, central business district, Mission Valley, which is exploding, and it's projected to explode even further. Can you imagine? So we want to make sure Mission Valley is served by light rail. It is now. Okay? It is now. What are the current trends? Well, we can see that most people are driving alone. That's the problem. This is the problem that every transportation planner faces in any city, anywhere in the world. How do we get people to either carpool or to take public transit, which is the least favorite alternative? Okay? So we have to think about what people want and how we can place convenient, efficient transit stops near where people go, make it more alluring than the automobile. Other questions you might ask when planning an LRT extension. What populations would be best served by transit? You have to consider minority and low-income populations. If people can't afford a car, and I'm not saying that minority and low-income populations can't afford a car. This is based on facts. Okay? This is based on 7 years of planning in one capacity or another. We have to look at these things. Who can afford a car? Who is elderly? Okay? We have a large segment of elderly population that is trans-dependent. Who is too young to be driving a car? And these kind of things are what we look at. And we use GIS to do it. Okay? These are GIS-produced maps using census data and other types of data that have been manipulated quantitatively, and a map is produced. It's brilliant, really. Who are the existing riders? Okay? We want to know if we can retain existing riders. We don't want to turn anybody off. How can we retain existing riders? We see that a large part of existing riders are occurring, again, in the metropolitan area. So this is where we put these kinds of things, these expensive trolley extensions. We don't have expensive trolley extensions that take you out to the Anza Borrego Desert. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? Furthermore, you couldn't negotiate the topography, okay, up and over the Cuyamaca Mountains. Alrighty then? Okay, so this corridor and down to the U.S.-Mexico border is also important to look at. Convenience factor. How far are people willing to walk? That's a big question. We call this the distance decay principle in geography. The farther away it is, the less the likelihood we have of engaging in that activity. People are only willing to walk 5 minutes. That's not much. That makes it hard as a transportation planner when we have one of the worst regions on Earth with regard to urban sprawl. So people are living out very far from the city center, and it's not likely that they'll be close to a transit stop. Okay? I went to literally 100 meetings over the years, trying to convince people, to let us put the trolley in their backyard, or to let us run a noisy diesel bus on their street. People don't like it. Okay, and it's hard to get people to accept it. Everybody wants the public transit to exist. They don't want to take it, they want everyone else to take it. I didn't even take it here, okay? But it doesn't work real well in San Diego. We may address that later. If you want to know why, well, you can ask me that. A lot of it has to do with urban sprawl and the low density of persons in a very large county. Okay, where does the money come from? Well, that's a huge concern. Transnet provided $87.3 million, which is the local 1/2 cent sales tax for transportation products. So 1/2 of 1% of your taxes are going toward transportation projects. Public transit, roads, highways, and so on and so forth. $17 million from state funding, $13.6 from federal congestion mitigation and air quality, $87.3 from Transnet, that's the local 1/2 cent sales tax, $1.5 million kicked in from SDSU, and $330 million from the federal funding. Okay, from the Federal Highway Administration and several other large regulatory agencies that are reviewing this project. Okay, so most of the money came from federal funding. All right, environmental impacts. Let's address those, and then we're starting to head downhill here in terms of coming to the end. National Environmental Policy Act, otherwise known as NEPA, is a federal environmental act that was signed into law in 1970, so fairly recent. Okay? It wasn't until the 1960s that we started to understand that humans are impacting the environment. Humans are impacting the environment in a negative way. And so we have to put together some protections for the environment. The law applies only to federal agencies and the programs they fund. Essentially, it requires that prior to taking any major or significant action, the agency must consider the environmental impacts of that action. What are the environmental impacts going to be of a major trolley extension like this? The California Environmental Quality Act, known as CEQA, is a California law that was passed in 1970, shortly after the federal government passed the NEPA. And CEQA does not directly regulate land uses, okay? But instead it requires public development projects submit documentation of their potential environmental impact and provide mitigation measures. How are you going to make up for the impacts that you're causing to the native birds and the native plants? As a result, you might guess that we had to conduct an environmental assessment, okay? Environmental assessment. It took about 3 years to do this, an environmental assessment. It's a long process, and it depends on the scope of the project, the size of the project. Sometimes it takes less. Sometimes it takes longer. You have to keep everybody happy. And there are reasons for this, and there are important reasons that these laws exist. An environmental impact assessment, EIA, or EIR, environmental impact report, is an assessment of the likely influence a project may have on the environment. Environmental impact assessment is defined as the process of identifying, predicting, evaluating, and mitigating, or making up for, addressing the biophysical, social, and other relevant effects of development proposals prior to major decisions being taken and commitments made. You can't just start building. You have to identify what you think the impacts will be. You have to hire the best consultants that say this is going to be this loud, and this is going to be this large, okay? And this is going to displace this many, coastal sage scrub habitats. And here's how we're going to make up for it. We're going to buy pristine land in the coastal zone in Central California, or we're going to buy some land over here. We're going to replant the Torrey pines at a ratio of 3 to 1 that we have to take down. Okay. The principal phenomena or pathways of impact are, in an environmental impact report, you have to address each of these issues. Soil contamination, air pollution, noise health effects, ecology impacts, including endangered species. We have about 500 in San Diego alone. Geological hazards, water pollution, circulation, which is traffic flow. Environmental justice, are we placing the trolley tracks or the bus routes in poor neighborhoods that can't afford a voice, or they can't get their voice heard, or the land is cheaper, and so we use our powers of eminent domain to purchase the cheapest land and put the trolley on that. Okay, and so they're disproportionately affected sometimes. Poor communities, socioeconomically depressed communities. No, coordination with local, state, and federal regulatory agencies is required. Every step of the way, you've got someone telling you what to do. The Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Department of Fish and Game, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they come out and check on us every week. okay, which isn't a bad thing, but it can be an impediment, depending on what they want you to do in terms of mitigation. We're not going to go into specific mitigation for this project. But the EIR, and remember, in part helping to assemble and disseminate it, is from the floor to the ceiling with all the technical appendices. Here's things we look at: potential endangered plant and animal communities. Here's a distribution of our communities, all of which have endangered species. Coastal sage scrub, like the Torrey pine is sort of the premier species that's endangered. Okay? You can't cut any of those down, actually, as it turns out. The chaparral community, which occurs mainly in the higher elevations, you can see that here in the yellow. And also the oak and pine woodlands up in the mountains mainly. And they don't have native animals that rely on the native plants. And so we have to take that into consideration because the balance, the ecosystem balance is important. Because humans depend on these animals and plants. 1/3 of what you put in your mouth has been pollinated by bees. Many of the bees, about 1/4 of the California crop, has been destroyed this year. They don't know what's causing it yet, but it probably has links to human or anthropogenic pollution. So we have to consider these things because they're essential to survival for humans. The county or the city of San Diego has what's called an MSCP, a multiple species conservation plan, and they're right on top of this stuff. Okay, and that's good. San Diego watersheds, we have to look at the watersheds. We care about fresh water at the surface and groundwater, so we want to make sure we're not doing any water resource damage, for example. When we pile the trolleys, the piles go right through the middle of the San Diego River. Okay. Air pollution is important. We look at where the sources of air pollution are coming from transportation and how much is attributable to light rail transit or buses, for example. And so we have to mitigate for that. We have to mitigate or make up for that somehow. Maybe we'll agree to use liquefied natural gas for a bus line instead of diesel. Okay, finally, smart growth is an urban planning and transportation theory that concentrates growth in the center of the city to avoid urban sprawl. That's part of what public transit tries to achieve. Okay? Try to minimize urban sprawl and try to help the people that are in the metropolitan area, in the denser area, get around, offer them alternatives to driving 2 hours to home and work and back. Advocates of compact, transit-oriented, walkable, bicycle-friendly land use, including mixed developments. We got a park, we got a house, and we got a shop all within walking distance. Okay, with a range of housing choices. Smart growth values long-range, regional considerations of sustainability. There's the buzzword, sustainability over a short-term focus. Its goals are to achieve a unique sense of community and place. There's that sense of place again that geographers care so much about. Expand the range of transportation, employment and housing choices, equitably distribute the costs and benefits of development, preserve and enhance natural and cultural resources, promote public health. These are all constituents of concern. We're taking smart growth into concern, now more than ever before because of the state of the world today and the possible unsustainable path that we're seeing. Principles of new urbanism. New urbanism is a movement that picked up in the 80s in the urban planning and architecture field that we study as transportation planners, geographers. And I pulled some information from the New Urbanism site and also from the Congress of New Urbanism. The Congress for New Urbanism is a very progressive, large environmental firm based in San Francisco. And they've got some incredible principles that need to be disseminated and are being disseminated with the goal of creating livable, sustainable communities. And public transit is attempting to do that. Okay, so that not everybody has to get in their car and get stuck in a traffic jam for 2 hours and burn all kinds of fossil fuels. Quality of architecture and urban design is important. I took this picture last weekend in Santa Barbara. It was incredible, really. Everything conformed to the sort of Spanish mission style. Even the Rite Aid on the main strip here on State Street. It was so neat. Sustainability, local production like farmers markets, reduced transportation costs, okay, and burning fossil fuels. More walking. These are incredible pedestrian-friendly streets. I haven't seen any like this in a long time, where you have very dense rows of vegetation blocking the pedestrian from the main street. Okay, de-emphasizing the automobile, 2-lane streets only instead of 4, 6, 8, 10. It's safer for the pedestrian. It creates more walking. People are more inclined to walk. And green design, that's a whole new field that we don't have time to get into, using recycled materials and so on. Walkability. This is important. This is smart growth. New urbanism is smart growth, essentially. We want things to be within a 10-minute walk. That's why I love living in these dense communities like Ocean Beach, where I lived for so long. I could walk everywhere except for to work. What garages in the rear lane? We want to de-emphasize the automobile. The older houses, the craftsman homes in North Park, they don't have the garage right up in front. You don't even see the garage, and that's what makes it beautiful. Okay? Let's de-emphasize that. Pedestrian thoroughfares. In Germany, Andrea, are you here? They call them what? Fußgänger, right? Fußgänger. Okay. Like this one here. Okay? And here we are walking on a cobblestone street. It's walkable. It's beautiful. It's Amsterdam. Connectivity, narrow streets, boulevards, alleys, garages in the rear lane, again, pedestrian thoroughfares. So I'm repeating myself on a couple of these issues because they're essential. Increased density. Here we are in Times Square. Wow, this is really the epitome of increased density in the developed world. Isn't this great? Oh, no. The sizzling energy that a city like New York offers. It's exciting. It's exciting. Okay? It's not for everyone, but some people have to make some choices now. Some people have to make some choices. San Francisco is an example of an East Coast city that's planned with these principles in mind, but it's on the West Coast. So if you haven't visited San Francisco, take a trip. Smart transportation, mixed use and diversity. We have a variety. That's what we like. Shops, offices, apartments, mixed housing, all in walking distance. And transportation corridors that link you to those, whether they be bus or trolley. Okay? So that's part of what public transit tries to achieve. Here are the new stations. Okay? The Granville station is in Mission Valley. It's an elevated station 50 feet from the ground. It's incredible art. Okay, recognizing the significance of the military. These are like military sails. And the whole platform is shaped from an aerial view like a ship. It's really cool. SDSU station, again, this is the premier LR station in the country. It's a subterranean station. It's got incredible art. We haven't even begun to discuss the art. It has buses. I worked for so long on the bus plan. How the buses would circulate above the trolley so people could go easily from the bus to the trolley. They're redeveloping the entire fraternity row on campus. The SDSU is working with the Transit Authority, working with the redevelopment arm, trying to foster transit-oriented development. Let's have places people can live right on top of the trolley so they can walk right down. They don't have to get in their car. The Alvarado Medical Center is just east of San Diego State. It's conveniently located in front of a huge, busy hospital, and so hopefully get riders there. It's got a lot of public art. We'll have to check it out. And then the 70th Street station, which uses mainly recycled materials because of its significance in proximity to Alvarado Creek, which it happens to go right over. Okay, and so these are recycled materials. It's incredible. Get out of your car and take a look. Get on the trolley, take a look at each of these stops. Think about how you might want to use public transit. And hey, maybe you want to move to the city center. Okay, here's just a few fun pictures. Planes, trains, and boats are mine. Okay, I myself have a love affair with the automobile, and it's not until the last year that I actually got an automobile that I wasn't afraid for people to see. But that I actually enjoy driving. Wow. And so maybe I won't be taking transit. But I think that I do every chance I get. Actually, I moved recently back to East County, to the city of my birth, if you can believe it. I love it. I love East County. Okay, El Cajon is the finest city on earth. And I live right across from the Amaya trolley station. Planes, trains, and boats. Here we are in southern Manhattan. Okay, taking the subway, which is heavy rail. It's fantastic. Okay, we don't have the density to support that. Here's another mode of transit. Pied. We're on foot here, hiking all the way around Kauai. This is a beautiful, you may have noticed this is the North American world realm. I also teach world regional geography, so I clump them in a few pictures by world realm. This is the North American world realm. So I'm using my foot power whenever I can to conserve the environment and to help foster sustainability. This is Santa Barbara last weekend, a Little Toot. That's the name of this boat here, the Little Toot. And you can take a boat, get an excursion around the city instead of driving your car. It was fantastic, really. Fantastic. There's so many alternatives. We're moving now into the Latin American world realm. I'm in the Caribbean here with Pedro, and we're taking a boat. Okay? Now, this burns fossil fuels, but I'm trying to just check out all the different modalities. Okay? If you're a transportation planner, you're not restricted just to one type. Okay? Okay, so we're having a great time here doing a little snorkeling, and it's a fabulous view on this piece of transportation. Okay, now we're moving to another region. This is the Middle East. Okay, we call this world region the Middle East. We're in Giza here, which is basically Cairo. Okay, got the Great Pyramid in the back, and in the developing world, students always laugh when I show pictures like this. This isn't funny, you know, this is reality. Okay, and it's a lot more sustainable, believe it or not. Okay, it's a lot more sustainable using biomass to get around. This is Israel. We have the Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock in the background, and Jerusalem, and using again biomass to get around. It's not uncommon, and again, a lot more sustainable. It's a form of transportation that's common. It's common. It's not producing any fossil fuels. Wait a minute. It is producing a greenhouse gas, though, methane, actually. That's okay. That's not the primary culprit. We're mainly concerned about CO2. Okay, we're moving on to the European world realm, the Western European world realm. This is the Loire region of southern France, and here I am in front of the tiniest Peugeot on Earth. And here in Western Europe, there's some of the most, we'll say environmentally cognizant or sound communities on Earth. And so small cars, partly because of the costs of fuel, but also because they're concerned about saving the environment more than many regions around the Earth. They're known for it around the world, their green policies. And so this small car is kind of status quo for getting around. Or public transit, excellent public transit in many different cities. But still in the Western European world realm, taking a tram, the famous tram, the Jungfrau. Okay, here's some nice shots now that we looked at it at valley glaciers. We call them alpine glaciers in class. We'll be getting to that later this semester. Well, next week, actually. Okay, still in the Western European realm, we're in the Northern European plain, okay, and the Netherlands. And they are a region that's below sea level, part of the region, and they use poldering to reclaim some of the land. Okay, so we're very, very close to or below sea level. So there are a lot of canals that exist. You use boats to get around, just like you do in Venice. I haven't included any of those photos here. It's spectacular. Look at the sense of place they've created here. It's a great place to visit. The Mediterranean, still in the Western Europe world realm. And I just got off this boat. I was taking it around the island of Mykonos. So there's other ways of transportation. There's other modes of transportation for getting around and enjoying the Earth that we study in geography classes. Here we are in St. Petersburg or Leningrad. And a lot of times, countries that are considered developing, and Russia, the Russian realm isn't generally considered developing today, but they have old trains or old buses or old cars. A lot of time they're relics of the colonizing country. And I found that to be true wherever I went in the developing world. Here I just got off this long train from southern India all the way up to northern India. It was about a 20-hour trip. And this is a relic of a cast-off, really, from Britain, because they were a former colony of Britain. And it was a hard ride, okay? A lot of times developing countries don't have environmental legislation in place to limit, noxious emissions, for example. And they're old trains that were given to them by another country or something. They don't work that well, they're heavy polluting, and that was true here. And I got off and I met some individuals that were men, but they were dressed as women. They have the largest homosexual population on Earth. And that made me, I don't know, I had a little smile. They were nice people right after I got off that train. So that was a good experience. This is not an uncommon sight to see in an intersection in the developing world. Camels, elephants, and people using bicycle or manpower to get around. This is in Jaipur, which is, I believe, in the state of Rajasthan in northern central India. This is in Bombay, their economic hub. And so this is not, again, uncommon. As the developing world struggles to develop, we are on the last slide here, I believe. The developing world struggles to develop. You see clashes between developed transportation and developing transportation. And right after I took this picture, a double-decker bus whizzed by. I'll never forget it. It was like yesterday. Which is a relic, of course, of Britain, who kept them colonized till 1947. This is in Southeast Asia. I spent 10 days in Bangkok. This picture is actually courtesy of a student of mine, because I liked hers better than the pictures I took on the Chao Phraya River. Okay, this little klang or market. And so people We use markets, waterways to get around for transportation. It's really wonderful. When you live in a region that's hit by monsoonal rains and a very humid climate, they need to have other modes of transit that work with water. Brilliant, huh? And here I am in the east, moving from Southeast Asia to the East Asian world realm. We're in Seoul, Korea. They've got heavy rail. Seoul, Korea is a wonderful city. It was freezing here, 5 degrees below on this day. But it's like being in the developed world. There are pockets, in the developing world, pockets of development that, like Singapore, for example, or Hong Kong. Seoul is an example of them, the capital of South Korea. A fascinating city. And a fascinating city to try and figure out how to read public transit signs and get around. That's part of the fun of being a transportation planner and a geographer. How do we get around? How do I interpret this? These points, these lines, these symbols. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You got a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Luke, what's up?
First of all, good job.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Could they ever
Appreciate
build
it.
a trolley out to like the beach areas, like Pacific Beach?
You know what? That's been proposed, and they've been looking at that sort of half-heartedly for years, the transit authorities and the different regional planning agencies. The primary reason that hasn't been done is because the corridors now that are like spurs off the 5 freeway, like Rand and Garnett, are so dense that they really can't accommodate some type of surface transportation that would commingle with traffic, like a trolley, and therefore you'd be relegated to like a monorail system,
Right.
and the people mover, hi Kim, the people mover is thought to be too expensive. It's even more expensive per mile of track than what we've got right now.
What about extending like?
So it's cost prohibitive.
What about extending like the Green Line all the way to the end of the 8? Like,
Oh, that'll never happen. I mean, it's
It's not
far
possible.
too.
We got the river there.
Yeah, it's all the way to the end of the A freeway.
yeah, like the.
Travel on the route, yeah.
Yeah, it's not dense enough. It wouldn't
So
have the
that'll
ridership.
happen,
It wouldn't.
right?
It doesn't warrant that based on ridership and common sense.
So yeah.
Oh, Professor Tremblay.
Oh, hi.
Hi. How are you?
You said, what is this, a $500 million system?
Something like
And you
that.
don't connect it to an airport?
I know.
There's a no-brainer.
I
You made
know.
the same mistake Bart made, and had to go back and cost $2 billion to fix it.
$2 billion to fix the airport.
Yeah, right away,
connection.
20 years later, it cost $2 billion to service SFO. As you know, as a traffic planner, you cannot control traffic planning unless you control land use. Because land use is what generates the traffic.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
unless you have strong enforcement procedures to control density and land use, none of your solutions will ever work.
You know, you're absolutely
Because
right.
there's a built-in fallacy about traffic planning, and that is, when you increase capacity, you know this well, on any mode, you increase latent demand. And when you increase latent demand, you increase the next developer's excuse to build out. So it's just a snowball. And so no amount of tinkering technically with the system is ever going to solve the problem. It's a land use problem.
I agree. And you know what? The city of San Diego has historically, in my opinion, not worked hand in hand with the public transit authority has not worked hand in hand with the land use development agencies. And I think that's a major oversight, and obviously that's an understatement. And I think that's in large part why the transportation doesn't work. That's one of the reasons why it's inefficient, along with urban sprawl and topography. And they've been doing that for years, Professor Tremblay. They have been doing that for years. In fact, check this out. This is a good example, a quintessential example. In Mission Valley, they built the trolley in Mission Valley. Sure, they're looking at the land uses when doing so, but they didn't. The Public Transit Authority didn't anticipate all the growth that was going to happen, and so they had to go back in after the Mission Valley West line was already built and put in the station at Fenton Parkway because of all the new housing. It was unbelievable. It was like, well, how in the world did you not know this ahead of time? And so there, at that fundamental level, there is no coordination, or there hasn't been for a long time.
I'm not so sure they want you to have any coordination.
Oh, maybe you're right.
You know, I mean, look at that.
That's another
You
possibility.
cite Sandag. I mean, Sandag's emasculated in terms of implementation and everything. Sandag is a joke, you know, in terms of getting stuff built. I mean, they don't have any tax collection power. They don't have any
Right.
zoning power.
Right.
You know, they're a think tank, basically.
Yeah.
So when you don't have a serious regional planning body with real implementation power, you don't get coordination.
You're
And
absolutely.
I think that was purposeful, it wasn't by
I
accident.
think you might be right, and that was probably the reason behind the merging then.
You know, look at the stations, if you really wanted to do, if you really wanted to have an impact on traffic, every station along the light rail, within a half a mile of walkability, should have been not only existing stations, but proposed stations rezoned from R2 or 3 all the way up to R6 or 7 or 8.
Oh, I've heard that.
So you really packed in the density
Yeah,
within
you're
walking distance.
You're absolutely right.
But what do? They do infill in and around the park and not around transit stations.
Yeah, you're right, it's silly.
That'll tell you who sold the farm to who.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely silly, and I had a
Yeah.
fundamental problem with that when I was planning. I mean, I wasn't the head honcho by any means, but these are things that I thought about frequently. For example, the 70th Street station. There was nothing rezoned there. How in the world are people going to? I mean, that's nowhere near any residential area. The 70th Street
I
station.
don't want you.
And then the only hope that we had of connecting that station to riders was across the other side of the freeway. And then the people on the other side of the freeway at 70th Street, they single-handedly shot down the flyover pedestrian bridge that was to occur, and it never got built. So there's nobody that can possibly
I didn't
even
understand
walk
the
to that
70th
station whatsoever. Even if they wanted to, you couldn't get to that station. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. What you're saying makes absolutely the best sense, and a lot of that didn't occur.
We can't afford to be doing that anymore.
I know, I know.
San Diego's going too damn fast.
I just want to say I live about 3 blocks from the 70th Street station.
Oh, yeah?
And
Up the hill, you mean?
up the hill.
Up on Elkhorn Boulevard, or what?
No, I live off of Saranac.
Oh, okay.
And as is typical in San Diego, and for example, you can go to San Diego State and see this, you can go to a lot of developments around San Diego. There's only sidewalk on one side of 70th Street, and it disappears. And their way of coping in the whole remodel, besides just taking traffic and turning it through a corkscrew to get off of the freeway and back onto 70th,
Yeah.
was to put up a little barrier that said, pathway closed, pedestrians crossed. So if you're going, and there's only one sidewalk on the freeway overpass on 70th Street. So if you're going from a Shell
That's
station
true, yeah.
on the Lake Murray side, you have to walk on the west side of that bridge.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Then you have to cross the street, cross over to the east side, walk up the hill, and then you have to cross back over to the west side to
Yeah,
get
you're
to
right.
where the people live.
No, they're thinking
I
about
mean,
that.
it's nuts. It's as if everybody sits in a room somewhere with spreadsheets and architectural plans, and nobody gets off their ass and walks the routes.
Yeah.
So I'm stunned that anybody would shoot down a pedestrian bridge, but a stairway and a right-of-way, or what do you call it, like a catwalk? You see these in Europe from time to time, like an easement that's as wide enough for a sidewalk. They would have gone straight up the hill from that station,
Yeah.
even would have helped. I'm sure they couldn't have built it because then they would have had to put in a $5 million escalator for ADA compliance. But
Well, a lot of things.
as
were
it is, a
planned.
wheelchair can't get down the 70th Street hill
Oh,
anyway to
absolutely
get
not.
there.
It's,
So,
I'm not sure how that is ADA compliant. It doesn't sound like it is. There are a lot of different elements of the project that didn't, ultimately come to fruition, and a lot of them were, kind of user-friendly elements. Unfortunately, it's too bad. If enough people complain, maybe they'll do something. It's out of my hands now, but I understand what you're saying.
you get the strong impression that there's like a border where one jurisdiction ends, and that's where they put up the pedestrian
Right.
across the street
That's where
sign.
the city of Mesa
And-
begins, right.
Exactly.
Well, there's a lot of resistance to public public transit, especially in the form of a large obnoxious trolley like that. And so people do, believe it or not, I went to meetings for years and years and years talking about the trolley and trying to get people to buy off on it, because you can't build it until everybody's satisfied. And you know what, it was always depressing, and it was always tough, and it was always combative. And there are so many individual elements of this project that didn't come to fruition that would have been more pleasurable and for the rider, and increased connectivity. Because people don't want in their background, they don't want people parking in their neighborhood and walking to the trolley, leaving their car in front of their house, graffiti, trash, whatever. And that's the major impetus behind a lot of those things. Yeah, Bob?
We have a lot of problems with the San Diego transit system, but it's still one of the best in the country. Go to some of these other
I
cities.
don't know if I go that far.
Well, I'm talking about I'm not talking about New York. Go to Indianapolis, Minnesota, and some of these places. Their transit system is just not.
Yeah, well, there are places that pale in comparison. You can get a bus from A to B if your life depended on it, but it's all relative.
Yeah.
Professor
Do you
Chapman.
think that, in a perverse way, $4 or $5 an hour gasoline will be the best thing that ever happened to Mass and Rapid Transit?
Yeah, I don't think that would hurt. I'm sure
I
that
mean,
would, I'm sure
people
that
are
would.
not, you're not gonna get people out of your car, out of their cars by making nice trains and parking space. The only thing that's gonna drive them out of the car is the hard way, European gas prices.
I doubt if that'd work
Yeah,
out
excellent
much.
point.
Well, I thought I was a pessimist. You're-
Dr. Reynolds,
Okay, that's where I came from, okay? I immigrated from Denmark in the late 70s, and by the late 70s, we had, and early 80s, this was fantastic. When I was commuting from, a small town where I spent part of the time, into Copenhagen, we had 4 buses an hour, 6 commuter trains an hour. Everybody could just buzz back and forth, and everybody was fairly contented with it, and not that many people had private automobiles. It was still something, and the automobile, for one thing, is 3 times more expensive in Europe than it is
Right,
here
that's
because
right.
of all the taxes.
Forgot to mention that.
Yes. But now, I visit every year. The traffic on the highways is abominable. They're stuck there for hours. It beats anything that you see going up through Santa Barbara here or I-5. And now there are 2 buses an hour, 3 commuter trains an hour. They're cutting back. People will not want to take those trains because there are, gangs are riding them, and there's graffiti, and there's dirt, and there's insecurity. They don't have the proper, they don't have the manpower to police those trains. So people are wary of it. They're sitting there in their own cars, and they're buying in. They are absolutely supporting all the environmental measures, but it doesn't help, because you can't get them out of their cars because the alternative is not presented in a viable way. So they're desperate now. They're not seeing it move in a positive direction. And the core of the cities now, they're pretty much closed off from traffic. You can't drive through the big cities anymore. They have big parking spaces outside of the town. And then people are pretty much on their own in terms of getting around the city.
European cities?
European cities.
Yeah, the city
European
plaza at
cities.
the center,
And,
sure.
and for all of the, and this is another fun aspect about this, that for all the emphasis on equality and elder care, etc., there are no provisions for disabled people to move around in the cities.
Really?
Yes, so it's this paradox of the commuter situation in big European cities now. It's just, I see it get worse every year.
Wow.
I just wanted to throw
Didn't
that
know
in.
much about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you raise the gas
It's-
prices,
Oh,
you just
I think I need
raise
to
the crime
taste
rate.
red.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your valuable input. Andrea,
Oh, I just
another
wanted to add
European
something.
commentator.
Yeah, another European. Well, I lived in Vienna for 2 years. I'm from Austria, and I never ever drove with a car. Never. I used the subway. I was an event planner, and I had to get from point A to point B all the time. And I just used my subway. It was 350 euros a year, and that's it. And the subway would go all the way up to 12:30. But I just wanted to add something to the disabled. Well, they have elevators. You actually can access every subway station with an elevator. I mean, you were maybe focused on
In Denmark, that is within the last
Oh, wow.
year, they have started implementing it. They've started implementing it. It's
That's
that
interesting.
it's
Well,
That
Vienna
is
has it.
interesting, considering you have a very elderly population.
Yeah.
That defies reason. I mean, that's the law here, Americans with
They go on
Disabilities
the
Act.
bus,
We have
they
to
fall
accommodate, we
down.
have to widen streets, remove street furniture, and have ramps.
It's just so that we don't, and I've left Europe and I love being here, as I can't tire of saying. But there are certain things that we focus on in our society that we have a tradition for, that they're actually just discovering in Europe, and I find that to be
Really,
interesting.
that is interesting. We were behind the 8 ball in so many ways, especially with regard to the environment, relative to Western Europe. Yeah,
I
Kim?
have a totally different kind of question.
Okay.
Regarding the environmental impact assessments that they do when they, look at, planning, can you give me an example of what kind of, like when they were planning the trolley or the section that you were working on, an example of what type of species that they were, how did they determine which species to consider, like having, mitigating it and replacing it elsewhere or doing something else? How do they determine that?
Well, they have to take a comprehensive look at every habitat that's impacted, and then look at, do an evaluation of which species are, endangered, which species are threatened, and so on and so forth. And then, you're basically mostly indicator species like birds and reptiles and so on and so forth. you're basically relying on the sort of expertise and the laurels of the environmental sub-consulting firms that are experts in that field. So they were largely telling us as the planners, kind of overseeing the different planning implements of the station, which species need to be mitigated for, and that was again, you always have the regulatory agencies looking over your back, so they're the ones that are telling you, these the monarch butterfly or the the gnatcatcher or whatever, or some of the sensitive bird and butterfly habitats, and all entire coastal sage grove habitat is endangered, and many of the things I'm looking at. And so it's a long process, and it's very, very complicated. But my role now was just one of the many planners and sort of environmentalists, and that wasn't really an area of specialty, but certainly you're aware of what the mitigation measures are going to be, although I wasn't directly involved in negotiating them. I did visit some of the sites out at Santee, actually, as it turns out. And so they try to relocate as many animals as possible, but often that doesn't happen.
So they kind of prioritize based on if they're threatened versus endangered, or
Sure.
and they kind of balance that out
Yeah, some
to
of
the
those
best of their ability.
those things are taken into consideration. Sure. Yeah, what's that?
Go shake the bush.
Because you're trembling.
I want to go, Nina, I agree with you to a point, but I don't think you're going to find the same problems you did in the Netherlands or the Scandinavia as you do in France. I think France is much better a level of traffic planning, and their TGV trains are fabulous, and France, I think, is very glowing light. But let me go back to this business about why you guys are duped in this country. You're not, it's not a matter of better planning or less planning. You are fighting a cabal of interests, business and corporate interests here, that are so powerful. The automobile industry, the gasoline industry, the road builders. I mean, look, when you buy a gallon of gas in the United States, how much tax are you paying, state and federal? 38-40 cents. Where does that money go back to? Goes back to Caltrans, so you can build more roadbed, right? So there's another self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you guys drive, the more roadbed you finance. The more roadbed you finance, the more you guys drive. You can't break that cycle because the cabal's got you by the, what? In Europe, what do you pay when you buy a liter or equivalent gallon of gas? You're paying several dollars per gallon, aren't you? That money goes where? Mass and rapid transit systems, see? So they use their drivers to subsidize their mass systems. We use our drivers to subsidize roadbed,
Yeah, you're right.
Interesting.
And how are you going to break that,
Yeah, those are some, you're addressing the most fundamental problems.
Well, people are unwilling to give up their car, they just don't want to do it. People don't want to, stop driving.
Well, you make it very painful for them.
True, and that's,
That would have to be $10 a gallon gas, because a lot of people, discretionary driving hasn't changed
I know.
yet from this
You're right.
price increase.
Yes.
People drive when they want to drive, where they want to drive, that's it.
In Southern California,
Yeah.
Right.
Northerners, different story,
Yeah.
okay? I'm from the Bay Area, and these are problems, issues we tackled 30 years ago and did something about them.
right.
But that's because there are alternatives. I mean, we don't
Mhm.
really have viable alternatives. If you live 15 miles outside of the nearest trolley line, you're not going to drive to your trolley line and leave the car there and then take the trolley for another 15 miles. You may as well drive the whole 30 miles.
Right, yeah, the partner ride isn't really highly utilized either, that concept.
Even with the 70th Street station, 3-4 blocks from my house, I ride BART more than I do San Diego trolley.
Do you really?
You go up to San Francisco and it's right there at the airport, to bring up the point that the
Yeah.
professor mentioned earlier.
San Francisco's always been good
What
transportation.
about UCSD? I mean, are any of these, besides the airport, these obvious
Yeah,
nexus?
actually, the only light rail extension corridor that they're considering
That's just a
is
suburb.
called the Mid-Coast Corridor, and it would come from the Old Town Transit Center and be a spur up along the coast up into University City. And I did work for 6 months actually on that particular, on different aspects of the planning of the station at UCSD. Met with a lot of different individuals there, trying to convince them, like San Diego State, to put it in the middle of campus. The initial alignment for this extension, the Mission Valley East, was to have the trolley station at San Diego State down next to the freeway. And all the students would have to walk up to the top of campus, and it was pulling teeth for years to get San Diego State to accept it in the middle of campus. And once they saw all the conceptual renderings, from the artists, and how it tied in the college area community, and it was just, all the new transit-oriented development and so on, investment that would occur there, then they started to buy the idea, and they ultimately did. And so that's good, because that increases ridership and connectivity. But at UCSD, once they started to see that, they wanted the station on the east side of the 5 freeway. And it was unbelievable. Yeah, they were absolutely staunchly, defending this 5 freeway, the station on the east side of the 5 freeway at UCSD. And I was part of the committee that helped to, convince them, if you will, to have it on the west side. And they have agreed to it, to have the trolley station at UCSD on the west side of I-5 freeway, in part because of the success of San Diego State. Those are the plans, and I don't know when they'll be implemented.
Did anybody pitch to them, all of these campus presidents in particular, just salivated the thought of charging a bundle for parking like UCSD already does? Is anybody pitching this to them about putting in a parking structure and making it a regional park and ride facility in addition to serving the campus? So it could bring in campus income?
Right.
I mean, that might be a way to
It's possible. You know what,
piggyback.
that's a very, we'll say, specialized aspect, of that plan. And you know what, I'll be honest with you. If you pull up the Sandow website, it shows you that engineers and the planners that are project managers in the Mid-Coast Corridor has their phone number right there. I would fire in a call, I don't know. I would say yes, but then, based on all these, shortcomings that we've observed here in this bright bunch of people today, world travelers and people who have lived abroad, I mean, it's very likely that perhaps they haven't considered that. I don't know.
With UTC and Del Mar and Solana Beach being so impacted and having a short back route to get to UCSD, that might actually work. I mean, they could actually populate a structure with 100, 200 cars
Yeah.
and charge them a monthly fee.
Well, that's part of the reason for the reservations about taking transit is because we charge too little for parking. Lots of free parking.